Welcome back to Black in Procurement Spotlight, a mini-series that I am hosting in light of Black History Month this month, celebrating some of the amazing and incredible Black women that currently work in the procurement and supply chain profession. So today I'm joined by Alia Campbell. So thank you so much for being here today, Alia. It's great to have you. I'd just like to kick off by asking you, to tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Saffron, and thanks for having me. So I'm an assistant director, associate director. My job title changes depending on who's writing it down. In the Deloitte Government and Infrastructure practice. So I've been with Deloitte for just over a year, so 15 months. Prior to that, I was head of commercial for the Department of Energy, mainly working on large grant infrastructure programs for clean heat and energy infrastructure. And rewind back to where it all started. I started my commercial career with the Treasury, working in kind of data and a technology program for about 2.5 years. And what I summarise as a career of two halves. The first half of my career I spent working in the legal sector, so doing litigation, a brief stint living overseas, and something else in between, corporate paralegaling.
Wow, it's really varied career that it sounds like you've had so far. What kind of got you into procurement, I guess, coming from that legal paralegal background?
I always say I was an accidental civil servant because until I found a job in the civil service, it never occurred to me. My mum was worked in local government, but she always made a distinction between being a civil servant and a local government officer, and I was like, cool, whatever that is. So I was on the legal pathway, having done kind of undergraduate law, postgrad law, converted my masters, was pursuing qualifying as a solicitor. That was a challenging pathway and a less rewarding one when it comes to the financials and the effort you're putting in to do kind of paralegaling and legal support roles. And I think I was kind of I would probably use the wrong phrase, but what do you call it, like a T, or you're in a junction and you need to go pick a direction. And I was just like, right, I need to do something different and I need to do something that pays me more. And cue government commercial. And it was kind of the gift that kept giving in terms of opportunities and kind of just unique roles that I'd done in government. The luck of having some really awesome people that I worked for. Probably one of a few people that's had two Caribbean senior managers, like deputy director level and also senior manager level. And I'll get onto that in my current environment, but so I think that kind of just really spurred me on to kind of see how far I could take this career, and spent probably about 3 years still kind of double tracking, pursuing law alongside the day job, both through kind of doing city corporate law placements and things like that. And in 2019, after, shall we say, a very clear direction from the corporate law scene, I said, you know what, I'm just going to put all my efforts into being a commercial and procurement professional. And I done kind of the Cabinet Office GCO, Stress Assessment and Development Centre. Again, done that, and I was kind of I didn't get an A first time. I was I got a B. And it was at the time that I'd done it was my backup plan to corporate law. So I was kind of okay, well, I just need to pass it. And then I got a B, and then the corporate law thing fell through. And I was just oh my gosh, this is terrible. I was being dramatic because it wasn't that deep. No one cared. And I got an A, I think probably a year after I got the B at the grade below. So it made no difference. So it was a very zigzag routine, but it's worked out.
Yeah. It's amazing. I also got a B in my assessment and development centre. So
the ADC is the ghetto. People don't understand. I've done probably about 10 corporate law assessment centres, and the ADC was harder.
Wow.
And I think it's because it was developed by private sector. And also all the assessors are people that are 20, 25 years experience. And I remember giving the feedback on it and being do these people even understand how I'm describing the job that I do in the same way? Because I don't speak their language. But I was also just quite resistant to the process anyway when I first done it. Then the second time I went through and I was I dare you not to give me an A. Because once you know, as they say, you need to know the game you're playing.
Yes.
And a lot of it was just actually responding to it kind of like you would in real life, in as much as you wouldn't just kick at a colleague or a senior manager, you would, do what you're there to do in terms of supporting them and being a pragmatic professional person. So yeah,
I found that element of it challenging as well, because you're in a simulated environment, aren't you, essentially, where you kind of,
and for so long,
yeah, the full day.
It's gone. Yeah, the first time was like a hostage situation because I'd done it in person and then I'd done the virtual one promotion, and the virtual one literally I'd done from home in lockdown, and it was just so intense. But because it was at home, it was like a little bit more controlled. Whereas like when I'd done it in person, I could hear the other people acting next door. I was just like, this is so distracting, and like everyone was giving it their best in person acting to stay in character. It was just really weird.
I can imagine. I did mine virtually as well, so I can't even imagine doing it in person. But I'm assuming that you're proud of the A that you got at the assessment development centre.
In the end, yeah, that was, I don't know, it was a turning point in terms of probably like a 10-month period where I was very committed to kind of delivering at a higher level and like a lot of endorsements, kind of go for promotion. And it was kind of just something I knew I had to do to demonstrate the user case.
Outside of that, just what's been kind of the proudest moment of your career so far?
Well, having gotten over the imposter syndrome stage and then being your own hardest critic, I'm like, well, what have you actually achieved? So that, yeah, I don't even know how to answer that. I think there's probably different stages of my career I've been proud for achieving different things. So there's been the kind of day-to-day delivery, there's been the survival things, there's been the kind of transformational skills pieces. So I think there was a lot of like transformational skills during probably 2020 and 2021. I think if you worked in government and frankly you were, I don't know, because some people didn't feel it, but I think most people working in quite busy government departments felt the struggle of the pandemic and probably really fast changes that were happening. So from a central government department, when there was just so much happening all the time, there was, a new scheme, suddenly another 100 million here, another billion that you needed to deploy here. And it just meant that it was manic in terms of kind of supporting different policy objectives and having to kind of work things through government approvals at a ridiculous pace, both through like internal approvals, going through Treasury, going through Cabinet Office. So I had a lot of opportunity to just really grow and kind of deliver without probably as much guidance as now that came through. I kind of like, well, obviously I knew what I was doing, so who needed the hand holding? But there were times where it was kind of like I could do with the sounding board, I could do with someone to help. But it kind of meant that by the time I delivered like some of the programs, like I was working on like a £300 million grant program and getting in place a procurement for that, getting through that, and I was kind of like, well, no one can stop me now. Like, I have suffered enough in order to deliver this program. And not by myself, but kind of as like a right-hand person to like directors and deputy directors to kind of drive the program forward, and especially even support, because I was an embedded commercial and procurement person in my team. I didn't really have a kind of wider commercial network because the people I knew best were the people embedded in my policy area. So that was a really good moment in my career. So I think just navigating kind of those complexities and just being able to see my own growth and kind of trusting my own instincts like day to day. And another kind of like D&I focused achievement was probably working on like the Black Action Plan with like a central government department, doing quite a lot, especially in the summer of 2020. Oh, actually, now I'm remembering some achievements. I think I hosted a panel event for some ridiculous number of like over 500 people in our department with like one of the sex, and it was all about race and allyship, and it was in as I say, the summer of discontent in terms of real racial like crap, frankly, in every different direction, and being able to kind of facilitate that conversation with like a department that was exposed in the same way to the same type of issues, but also really close to central parts of government who weren't necessarily supporting on a number of racial issues that people were not even complaining about, but a lot of light was being directed to those issues in 2020. So that was a really proud moment. And then I think final moment was when I decided to leave government. And I had 3 offers from the private sector to kind of take on a new role. I think it was just one of those kind of yeah, you've got this kind of moment in terms of seeing the culmination of the past. I can never remember how long I've been working either, but call it the past decade worth of experiences, and kind of seeing that recognised with like offers on the table and the cash to match. So
yeah, the skills, the expertise that you've developed over that time, just immense and incredible. And I think the interesting thing about government is that it's likely that you don't find any other project that's as big, as complex as those that are in government. I mean, it's incredible, the numbers. I think one of the things that I always say about my time working in government is that prior to me starting in the civil service, I didn't know how to write a billion. It sounds really silly, but in actual digits, I didn't know how many zeros were on a billion, but you quickly get used to actually writing that out.
And you know, it's only when you start dealing in your own real money in real life, because like alongside the kind of life and professional journey, like the last 3 years has been like a property journey for me as well. And when you start seeing like what your real salary converts into, like being able to buy a property, you're like, those numbers I used to deal with, they're not the same. Like,
yeah,
my money's a lot smaller personally than what
the money that I can spend on myself is a lot less than the money that I can spend
very different. Yeah. It's very, very different figures. But I suppose it gives you a confidence even in like your personal life to be like this is not that it's small fry, but you're kind of like, look, I deal in millions and billions and hundreds of millions. Like, let's get this 100K like sorted. Like, why are you stressing me about a small mortgage? I'm just like, do you know how much debt the UK is in? Like, have you seen the Treasury balance sheet? Like, and so it helps put a lot of things in perspective outside of life. And also procurement and supply chain when you're developing your own house. Let's just say being a procurement professional can't save you.
Doesn't help, does it? Enough. No.
It's not enough. Because, you don't want to just be like, look, I manage £1 million contracts every day, because people think somehow you doing that for work, people convert into your pocket. And it's like, no, they're not related at all.
Unfortunately.
But yeah.
And you touched on some of the work that you did in the inclusion and diversity space there, which is how I met you actually, through some of the work that you were doing in government commercial function at the time. And I think one of the questions that I've got, particularly obviously as the founder of Black in Procurement, is what do you think are some of the ways that we can encourage more Black people into the profession, obviously given that diversity is at the forefront at the moment?
I'd say one of the key things, and I think through Black in Procurement and like sessions like this, is actually putting a spotlight on people like us that do these jobs in huge organizations that are really diverse roles, and really being able to highlight, I think, the spread of skills that would allow you to do a job like this. Because I think even in like my current team, in my teams in government, I think only in the last couple of years, maybe 30% of people intentionally pursued a career in procurement and commercial, whereas a lot of other people kind of diverted into a career in commercial and realised that they had loads of transferable skills. So being able to define, well, what does your career path look like? What does your development and trajectory look like? And I think that's probably, in government, it's quite easily defined through government commercial now, but in the private sector, like you look into the big four and it's quite opaque in terms of, well, like, oh, they've got commercial people, like where do they sit? Do they sit in consulting? Do they sit in advisory? And like, it's hard to know where to navigate in terms of a procurement professional wanting to work outside of government. So I think spotlighting kind of people's career pathways, and also what those development and, I suppose, professional advancement opportunities are. Because I think there's central government, there is private practice, there is probably in every big FTSE company, there is a procurement function that needs to deliver sourcing and procurement and manage contracts throughout the life cycle for that organization. Like, absolutely. I think it's quite endless in terms of like those type of professions, but it's not the first profession you would hear about if you went to a careers fair.
No, it isn't. I didn't know about it until I got into it when I first joined us in sourcing. So I rocked up and was like, what's an RFP? I don't know. I've never heard of that before. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the skills in the previous roles that are done obviously were transferable in terms of the sourcing itself, but just not heard of it as a career, which is insane because everyone needs to buy. something.
Well, exactly. And even so, we now have a graduate intake, and I would say, like, whilst they're on a corporate advisory kind of initial development pathway that they've come in through as grads, I'd say the last couple of years intakes, I'd say probably a 50-50 split in terms of those people that do more procurement, advisory, and complex sourcing versus those who do traditional corporate finance and advisory. So like that's a pathway in, but it wasn't even how we would brand ourselves. Whereas now procurement is a requirement for all of our people at junior grades, well, and up until the assistant director grade, so senior managers who need to have that as a core skill and need to build it through mandatory training, which we've got loads of. But yeah, it's kind of a fundamental skill, and I wouldn't undersell the complexities that sit within it because of kind of the UK regime around public sourcing particularly. But it is something that you can develop the muscle to understand it if you're a commercially minded person.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think it is a fundamental skill, you know, that commercial mindset in this role in particular. And speaking of graduates, I guess, and people that are generally at the start of their career or looking at their options, what's kind of one piece of advice that you would give to someone at the start of their career?
Decide how long you want to work for, because you know, like it feels like a very long path. Like if I think back to when I graduated, and I went, those who are quick on math can probably figure it out, but I didn't see the pathway to here, like in terms of both the time elapsing, but also the type of skills and kind of personal growth that you would need to do to kind of establish yourself in a career. But I would say just don't be rigid. Like what you want to do at 23, 22 may have no bearing on where you are in 10 years' time. But I'd say, you know, having that kind of curiosity to learn new skills, having the right attitude, because, and I'm not ageist, I'm really not, but young people really. Me and a colleague were talking about this today. We were like, gosh, they come in so confident. And it's like confidently knowing nothing. Like, and I respect it, because I think I came from a generation of like, we came into corporate environments, especially as like a Black woman, like first generation corporate person in the family. It was like, oh, like I need to like really behave. Like I can't have fun with this. Whereas like, I think the last year especially, I've had some of the best times ever at work. And I'm just like, who knew? Like work could be this fun. Like, and it encourages you to work hard, but also it's balanced with the fact that I have the credentials to back up of being more relaxed at work. Whereas at the start of your career, you need to focus on actually honing those baseline skills, and you're not going to become an expert overnight. And frankly, you've got time. You've got
it's
time.
All right. It's all right to not be an expert when you first start.
Honestly, just be curious, be engaged, and you know, actually look for things that engage you. So I think, well, okay, I didn't work straight after I graduated because I just done more studying. But if you do come straight out of like an undergrad or an apprenticeship into like full-time work, I think, yeah, just appreciate the early experiences. And more than anything, my advice is often, if you can afford not to go straight into work, don't, because it built character not having to work immediately. But yeah, so I'd say enjoy the early years. And oh my gosh, go and live overseas. Like I encourage everyone to think about our secondment and spending time overseas doing something that may be nothing to do with your undergrad. And I think that's probably the best thing I've done after my postgrad was move overseas.
That is,
and I wish I'd done it sooner, to be honest.
Yeah, that is the real character building stuff, moving overseas and immersing yourself in it.
Do you know, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you can't speak the language, you learn other ways to figure out life. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I encourage everyone, like, just take the opportunity. Like, you know, sadly due to Brexit, it's a bit
harder.
You know, it's not as straightforward to move within Europe anymore. Because I remember, like, I moved to Belgium and I literally packed my 2 suitcases, got on the Eurostar. I was just like, wow, I live in Belgium now, so stop me.
Yeah. Likewise, when I went to Paris, like literally the same.
Yeah. It was just an easy move, like, and then I didn't stay long enough that I had to become like a registered citizen either. So I was just like, oh no, my time's up. I'm going to head back to England now. And it was just such a freedom, but it was just an experience that really opened my eyes to kind of other people's educational backgrounds and kind of how we all ended up in the same place. And it was just, I think a really like inspiring and kind of culturally engaging opportunity. So go overseas when you're young, and if you've got limited responsibilities, just explore.
Have fun. Yeah. I love that. Absolutely love it.
I still want to explore and have fun now, but life responsibilities hold me down.
Responsibilities take over.
Responsibilities so it's less easy to justify like going to live overseas when you've got a house. And kind of like it's just not as easy. So
oh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Alia. Thank you so much for your honesty and your openness in sharing your career experience today, and some of the tips that you would give to other people in terms of starting their career and keeping a curious and open mind and having fun at the heart of it as well is so important. But really, really appreciate everything that you shared today, your insight and your inspirational journey as well. So thank you, Alia.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always keen to chat when there's an opportunity. It's been really good. And again, thanks for hosting.